Hi, hello. How you doing? Nice meeting you. My name is Julia, and on this channel I talk about art, books, and museums. Today's video is about books, especially books that I read in January 2023. And I'll begin with the book that I started actually in December 2022, but finished in January, and it is called Kink Stories, edited by R.O. Kwon and Garth Greenwell. So basically it's a collection of little essays, little stories, very sex-positive stories about different desires or kinks, you may say. Yeah, I think my favorite stories among all of them is this one, The Lost Performance of the High Priestess of the Temple of Horror by Carmen Maria Machado. I know that this author, Carmen Maria Machado, also has the book Her Body and Other Parties. And actually, after reading this little story in Kink Stories, I thought maybe I'll just pick her book and read the whole book because I like her style and I enjoy it. So yeah. So this is it. This was my first read in 2023. The second is Alice Smith Winter, finally finishing this book. I also started before even Christmas. So this is a very simple story. We follow the main character named Art, short from Arthur, which I actually like, and he is visiting his mother during the Christmas holiday, and he hires a girl to act like his girlfriend and to travel with him to his mother's home. You probably know that Alice Smith published the whole series of the seasons starting from autumn, published in 2016, then winter in 2017, spring in 2018, and then summer in 2020. So it is considered one of the most important books of our times in the UK because it is written, so to say, post Brexit. I can't say I enjoyed it immensely. I loved a couple of ideas about family and the history of family. I like her word playing games, but in general, I'm just not concerned with these political problems, and I can't share the same anxiety that the author is trying to convey. In her first novel, for example, the first novel of the series, Autumn, that was also the case. She was also trying to describe people in this pre-Brexit situation. But anyways, I was captivated by her masterful exploitation of artist biography. I didn't even pay attention to Brexit and all that jazz. That was not important for me. And in Winter, I know she's also trying to explore human relations in the uncertain times, but I guess I didn't care much. And to be completely honest, I almost DNF'd it last year. I just forced myself to finish it this year, and honestly, when I learned about this series, I got so excited. I promised myself I'll read all 4 books, and again, I don't deny I will read them one day. I don't give up the idea. It's just I'm less enthusiastic and more skeptical, but that is fine, I guess. So yeah, this is it for Alice Smith, and the next book I have for you is called Reading Lolita in Tehran by Azar Nafisi. Look, if you love classical literature and if you want to learn more about the modern history of Iran, you must read this book. This is a memoir of the writer and the professor of English literature in Tehran, Azar Nafisi. She tells the story of her life at the end of the 20th century, prior to her departure from Iran. Eventually, the story stretches back to the times of the Cultural Revolution of 1979 and the consequent events that affected the life of our heroine and her students. If you are not familiar with the Iranian history, no worries, it is very beginner-friendly. She explains a lot of historical moments. When reading it, I didn't feel confused or lost. It was rather easy to follow. Plus, she shows how Iranian people, primarily her students, deal with the ethical and religious questions almost every day. The most representative episode of this for me was the class when they staged the trial, The Great Gatsby versus the Islamic Republic of Iran. A lot of problems that prosecutors of this trial expressed towards the novel, some people actually have towards the contemporary art, and it shows how people can't find a consensus on how to perceive art and what to demand from the artist, from the art, and whether we actually have right to demand anything from them. That moment, and in general this moralistic approach towards artistic expression in the authoritative states, that hits too close to home. Another thing I like about her book is her sense of humor and the attitude of her students in this situation. They're all very disappointed yet witty, enraged yet sarcastic. It is very inspiring to see the smart women and men going through the obstacles in their politics, families, and workplaces. So yeah, I enjoy this novel very much, and I can recommend it to almost anybody. So after New Year Eve, I decided to read perhaps the most celebrated novel of Alexandre Dumas, The Count of Monte Cristo. I purchased the second-hand copy in Russian. It's pretty old, published in 1990. It's older than me. I found it online, obviously. Anyway, so The Count of Monte Cristo consists of 6 parts, and in my case, it is 2 volumes. Basically, I read half of it. 1 volume of 3 parts I finished in January. And so I decided once I finish the second book, I will share my thoughts about it. But so far I can say it's so easy to read. It's so good. Sometimes it actually stops me from going to bed. And I always can't wait for that day or that part of the day when I just sit with this book and read it. Because it's so good and it's so entertaining. It's almost like watching your favorite TV show, you know? So yeah, I will share my thoughts more when I finish the second book. And finally, the results of my 24 hours readathon dedicated to Toni Morrison. First thing I want to say about this particular edition is that it's such a great idea to put a foreword of the author before the novels. I like when they do that. And in case of Toni Morrison, this is such a great decision because as a true artist, she has a lot of different meanings and she carefully designed her novels. So in foreword, she explains that a little bit without any spoilers. So for me, it was easier to understand her. Secondly, guys, I think that this is my new favorite author. And let's begin with The Bluest Eye. It was published in 1970. So our main character, Pecola Breeds, dreams of having the blue eyes, whilst her eyes are just brown ones. And I think this story is quite universal and at the same time is very unique. The feeling of wanting to change something in one's appearance, so it would change something or even make you happy. I think this feeling is familiar to many people. But there is, of course, this thick layer of complexity because it is important to understand the skin color of our heroines, their economic condition in which they grow. So Toni Morrison collected all these episodes of life, episodes of embarrassment, awkwardness, betrayal, imprisonment in social inequality. There were many moments I thought I would cry for this main character, but I couldn't. And what I felt throughout the whole book is this bitter injustice. But it is just the right amount of it, just to give you a taste of it. Toni Morrison threw all these misfortunes on this little girl, but then you start thinking about it, and the moment you begin to scale these tragedies to the whole life duration, not just one particular stage of life, or if you scale it to the whole generation of people, or even nations, when you imagine people living in this injustice all the time, then it hits you really hard. So The Bluest Eye is very much open to your interpretation. I, for that matter, still can decide whether it's magic in the novel or the demonstration of psychosis. So I guess I'll need to reread it and decide later, but still it's a great book. But then you pick Song of Solomon and your heart breaks when you finish its last page. So there's one thing you should know about me. I love family sagas and family histories told through any means of art. My favorite books of all times are Pachinko and 100 Years of Solitude. And now I should admit A Song of Solomon is one of them. First of all, the psychological portraits that Toni Morrison presents in this book are just exquisite. So secondly, I also appreciate her non-linear, non-chronological storytelling. So whilst Pachinko and 100 Years of Solitude tell the story from the past to the present, Song of Solomon is structured slightly differently. It is divided into two parts. In the first part, we get acquainted with this one family. We're getting old or growing up with them. Morrison also encrusted her narration with the occasional stories from the past, so we're prepared for the second part. And then in the second part, one of the main characters, Milkman, travels to the places of the family origin. And in other words, the first part tells you the story of the family, and the second part makes you unravel the rest of it together with the main character. Something similar I felt while reading Dostoevsky Adolescent, because it is also full of family secrets and intrigues, but of course this is where similarities end. Nevertheless, the ability to braid so many stories and sub-stories into one is of great talent. The third thing that I love about Song of Solomon is what Toni Morrison does to the names of the characters. I know there is a history behind Afro-American names and how back then, after the abolition of slavery, a lot of them acquired new so-called official names for bureaucratic purposes. So in the foundation of the story, there's a little confusion in the process of getting a name. But then she plays with that and transforms it almost into a character name. I don't know about the English literary tradition, but in Russian classics, for example, it is very common to use so-called character names. Character name basically means giving a name to the character of your novel that describes or reveals a particular trait of this character. And so Toni Morrison does that, but not all the time. And in general, how names help our characters to find out his past, or how they chose names from the Bible. I don't know, there's so many things to think about it in terms of names, and I believe one can write the whole dissertation about it. Maybe somebody already did, I don't know. Yeah, I particularly enjoyed that part of the book, that particular thing about Song of Solomon. And of course, I can recommend it to everybody. It is one of my favorite books now. So yeah, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my little selection I read in January. I'm going to post another video on TBR in February. So yeah, let's meet there. I'll see you very, very soon. Bye.